Good evening, I'm Katerina Georgieva. Here's what's making news right now.
We've seen this pattern before. We know where it's headed. And if nothing changes, it's going to be higher community rates, higher infections in the community, which then translates into higher hospital infections and admissions, as well as higher ICUs. And we have to do something to stop that.
You know, we all miss going to the coffee shop in the morning or breakfast on a Saturday or Sunday morning. We'll get back to that. I just don't know when.
We've come a long way from quarantine hotels back months ago. So this is just the new world we're going to live in now, and we've got to deal with it.
Thanks for joining us. COVID-19 is once again putting a squeeze on local hospital services. Windsor Regional Hospital is telling the public to anticipate delays. It says anyone coming to the ER should expect longer than usual wait times, and treatment for non-emergency injuries will be much longer than usual. Given the rate of community spread, there is concern hospital resources could be overwhelmed.
We've seen this pattern before. We know where it's headed. And if nothing changes, it's going to be higher community rates, higher infections in the community, which then translates into higher hospital infections and admissions, as well as higher ICUs. And we have to do something to stop that.
There are currently 18 patients in hospital with COVID-19, 10 of which are in the intensive care unit. And it's the first time in several months that there have been cases in the double digits in the ICU. The hospital's chief of staff says there's no question that the vast majority of those patients are unvaccinated. And in addition to grappling with the growing COVID-19 cases, Windsor Regional is also seeing a dramatic increase in young children with severe respiratory issues. In recent months, the hospital has had to transfer 11 pediatric patients suffering with RSV. That's the respiratory syncytial virus, to either London or Detroit. A fatal collision early this morning in Leamington. It happened at about 6 o'clock. Were confirmed dead at the scene. OPP's Leamington Detachment, Essex Windsor EMS, and Leamington Fire Department all responded to the call Friday morning. The collision closed Highway 77 between County Road 14 and Mercia Road 10 for about 8 hours. Police have not yet released the names of the victims. People in Wheatley might notice more movement around the evacuation zone. It's part of the continued search to figure out what caused the explosion in August. And it comes as officials learn more about where the suspected gas is coming from. Chris Ensing reports.
There's 3 areas of concerns right now, and officials are focused on 2. The first is the actual blast site, which is at a pub in the core of Wheatley. The second site is the parking lot behind it. Gas readings from both of those sites, officials confirmed today, are consistent with what would be found in a naturally occurring gas well. We do know that there's an abandoned gas well that's in the area. The investigation is now focusing on if there's a pathway between those 2 sites where the gas could travel, or if there's potential for another source for this gas that may have led to the explosion that occurred in August. It's all happening as people are finally being let back in to view their property, to look at their homes, to look at their businesses. I spoke with one mechanic who's been able to go back and see his shop. He was just told yesterday that it's in pretty good condition, but he now has accepted that a quick return is unlikely.
I was able to get in a couple of times, but trying to move a shop in an hour is impossible. And I know they're working on it every day. We're almost there. Then the gas came back again, and everything had to be pushed back. That's life.
Officials with the municipality of Chatham-Kent are letting people know that there will be more action at the scene in the coming days. On Monday, hydro poles will start to be removed. That's in anticipation of the demolition of a couple of buildings that were destroyed and have been deemed unsafe to leave standing. Chris Ensing, CBC News, Wheatley.
Since the pandemic began, Windsor has accepted far fewer refugees than previous years. It's a trend that's happening across the country. Canada is behind its target refugee intake goal. CBC's Jennifer Lagrassa spoke with one family who arrived in Windsor months ago after a long wait.
Zacharias Sidi and his family spent the last 8 years moving around the Middle East, trying to find a safe and permanent home. When ISIS invaded his hometown in Syria, he says he fled on foot, carrying only his children in his arms. In 2018, while in Iraq, they got the call that they were refugee candidates. 2 years later, after multiple interviews and medical checks, they completed an orientation, a sign, Sidi says, that you will leave for Canada soon. Sidi speaks through a translator.
Getting to Canada, in my opinion, is winning the lottery. After all this waiting, when we received the news that we can go to Canada, we were so happy because I was feeling that I'm gonna settle, be safe, not fearing from the unknown, not fearing from tomorrow.
But the pandemic delayed their arrival. 5 months ago, they finally got here. His family are some of about 330 refugees welcomed to Windsor as of October this year, far less than the average number annually. In 2019 alone, the number of refugees arriving here was nearly triple that. And across the country, there's a similar trend. By October, Canada was only about halfway to its target refugee intake goal of 81,000 people.
Southwestern Ontario's YMCA said they noticed a drop in their clients, but even then they were still just as busy. They called it the digital divide, and they said a lot of newcomers were left behind. The clients that they had here needed help pivoting to an online world during the pandemic, things like accessing community services or even setting up their children's laptop.
And while those already here struggled to adjust to a new country during a pandemic, Sidi says that's all gone smoothly. The hardest part was waiting to start his new life.
It was very difficult. If I picture myself there and I think about the people there who are still waiting, it is really hard feeling. You are staying there at the stage of the unknown, the stage of, okay, am I gonna get to Canada or no?
And while Sidi is so grateful to be here, he still thinks of those who are waiting, like his sister and his friend. Jennifer LaGrassa, CBC News, Windsor.
We turn now to a major story in Michigan. The parents of the teen charged in the Detroit area high school shooting this week are facing charges themselves. This as new information has been revealed about the days and the hours leading up to the shooting, where 4 students were killed, 7 students and a teacher were hurt. Here's the latest from NBC's Dan Sheneman.
15-year-old Ethan Crumley charged with killing 4 students at Oxford High School. Now, his parents also charged.
James Crumley is charged with 4 counts of involuntary manslaughter. Jennifer Crumley is also charged with 4 counts of involuntary manslaughter.
According to the prosecutor, the gun used by Ethan was legally purchased by James Crumley just last week. It was stored in an unlocked drawer.
Clearly, based on the statements of the shooter, the statements of Mom, that was his gun.
And new details revealed about the day of the shooting. The prosecutor says a teacher came across a note by Ethan that alarmed her. It included horrific drawings and messages. It led to a meeting between educators and the parents.
James and Jennifer Crumley resisted the idea of then leaving the school at that time, of their son leaving the school at that time. Instead, James and Jennifer Crumley left the high school without their son. He was returned to the classroom.
Prosecutors say Ethan had the gun with him. Later that day, shots were fired.
When the news of the active shooter at Oxford High School had been made public, Jennifer Crumley texted to her son at 1:22 p.m., quote, "Ethan, don't do it," end quote.
4 students were killed, 7 students and a teacher wounded.
The notion that a parent could read those words and also know that their son had access to a deadly weapon that they gave him is unconscionable, and I think it's criminal. It is criminal.
The parents are scheduled to be arraigned today, but they are not in custody. Dan Sheneman, NBC News.
Earlier today, we heard that both the FBI and the U.S. Marshals were looking for the parents, but officials now say that they are returning to the area to face arraignment. Their lawyer says they were not fleeing, but that they had first left town for their own safety. And with a flurry of new travel rules from both the Canadian and American governments, some who have vacations booked in the new year are growing weary. But a local travel agent says, hang tight.
It's really no point if you're traveling in February or March, for March break, for example, to cancel now anyway. So whether you cancel now or in a week's time or 2 weeks' time, it's really no different. So my advice right now is to hold off. Let's see where this goes. And if everybody has a different safety threshold on what they can deal with and what they want to deal with. So we respect that with every single client. And just let us see how it plays out and go from there.
Valente himself will be flying into the U.S. and will be subject to their travel rules when he heads home. Now, for anyone flying back into Canada from anywhere except the United States, they will need to get tested and isolate upon landing. Today, some more clarity on what that all means. Mandatory arrival testing is still in the rollout stages. And if you're flying into Canada, if you're fully vaccinated, you'll either get swabbed or get a take-home test upon arrival. You can then quarantine at home while you wait for your results. If your final destination is Windsor with a stop in Toronto first, you would get tested there and then continue on home to Windsor. And you can isolate here. There are tougher rules for those who are unvaccinated. According to officials at Pearson Airport, if you haven't had your jab, you'll need to quarantine at your first location, like Toronto, before catching a connecting flight like one to Windsor. Canada wants urgent changes to trade plans for the auto industry. That's because officials fear a Buy American budget bill could be detrimental to Canadian manufacturing, and that could hit the brakes on auto here at home. CBC's Alexander Panetta joins us now from Washington. Alex, you're our expert on this. Now, we've seen this Canadian diplomatic blitz descend on Washington this week. How is that going?
Well, I'd say that it's going about as well as can reasonably be expected, which is to say Canadians are making people here more aware of the concerns they have without necessarily making a whole bunch of tangible progress. I just want to set the context here for folks back home, because I think in Canada this is a very big story. In the United States it's not. Just in Congress this week is one of the busiest weeks in memory. You have the Congress narrowly averting a government shutdown. The U.S. government almost ran out of funding the last couple of days. You have the U.S. Congress facing a debt limit in a couple of weeks, which, if not extended, could cause the United States to default on its debt and melt down the global economy. You have the Pentagon running out of money at the end of the year, and partisan intransigence has stalled efforts to continue funding the Pentagon. And then finally, you have this Build Back Better bill, which is a couple thousand pages long and is the most important social legislation in a half century, the most important vote the Democrats may ever take in their careers. And it does a whole bunch of things, expanding child care, daycare, a whole bunch of things. And it just so happens that on pages 1870 and 1873 of this bill, there are things that are terrible for the Canadian auto sector. And Canada's here asking people, please pay attention to this. Please help us with this.
Right. So, Alex, can you give us a bit more background info on the bill itself? Are Canadians trying to have the bill disappear completely or just in parts?
No, absolutely not. I would actually suspect that most Canadians would be delighted with a number of things in the bill. The bill, and it's mostly domestic spending legislation, but it's expanding childcare, expanding or universal pre-K, lowering drug costs, lowering insulin costs, and expanding the use of electric vehicles. And here's where there's a problem for Canada. And in that expanded use of electric vehicles, there's an incentive for people to buy electric vehicles, which, as people in Windsor know, it's kind of the future of the automobile sector. In that, I mentioned 2 pages earlier, 1870 and 1873. On page 1870, it spells out a $12,500 credit to buy an electric vehicle. $4,500 of that is set aside for people who buy cars assembled in the United States. On page 1873, it says that the entire $12,500 credit will go to American-bought vehicles starting on January 1st, 2027. So basically, the disadvantage Canadian manufacturing will face goes from $4,500 right away to $12,500 per car. Now, you guys know the sector a lot better than I do in Windsor. I could just imagine that if I have to decide where to park a bunch of money, I'm an auto company trying to decide where to build a line, I'm much likelier to park that money in a country with 330 million potential customers, where I get $12,500 off, or they get $12,500 off for buying cars I build in that country. And it's obviously a terrible thing for automobile investment outside the United States, which is why Canada's fighting it so hard.
And Alex, as you mentioned here in Windsor, folks are really looking at this closely. Like how crippling could this really be? Can you spell it out for us?
Well, I mean, again, it's you're buying a $30,000 car. Are you going to buy a car that costs $30,000 that gives you $0 in tax credits? Or are you going to buy a $30,000 car where you're getting $12,500 back? I would submit to you that the chance you'll buy the latter car is much higher. And if that latter car is built in the United States, you're going to have people building more cars in the United States. And I've heard some people suggest that the Canadian government should just match this. And I think, that's partly missing the point. While it might help sell additional cars in Canada, the big payday for any manufacturing industry in Canada is selling across the border. And Canada's had 56 years of integrated auto sector with the United States. And like I said, I think it could potentially, or at least the Canadian government's word, it could be potentially crippling.
That's the CBC's Alex Panetta reporting from Washington. A new study in the UK finds that booster shots can cut COVID infections by up to 93%. The first of its kind research was published in the medical journal, The Lancet. The study looked at the safety and effectiveness of 7 vaccines when they are given after 2 initial doses of either the Oxford AstraZeneca or Pfizer-BioNTech vaccines. CBC's Tessa Arcilia has the details.
This study involved some 3,000 adults, and it found that for people who received AstraZeneca as their first and second doses, all 7 of the vaccines tested in this trial seemed to be effective in boosting immunity. Now, for those who received Pfizer as their first and second doses, which a lot of people in North America would have gotten, only 6 of the 7 vaccines are effective as booster shots. Now, of all the 7, the 2 most effective ones are the mRNA vaccines, which are the Moderna and the Pfizer ones.
It could be serious, but what that means in terms of the consequences for the pandemic and the potential need for additional control measures is not yet known. I think we've done the most important thing, which is accelerate boosters.
It's important to note that they were trialing these booster shots against the Alpha, the Beta, Delta, and the original Wuhan strain of the variant. Omicron is still very new, but they did say that the promising results of this trial gives them hope that the protection could possibly translate to be effective against the Omicron variant. Now, the World Health Organization was also asked whether boosters would be part of their guidance to the world. Their chief scientist said that every option is on the table, and they're looking into that. But she's also keen to reiterate that the variant we're dealing with right now, 99% of infections in the world are still the Delta variant.
This variant would have to be much more transmissible than Delta to outcompete and become the dominant variant worldwide. It is possible that it could happen, but I think it's impossible to predict. And in terms of numbers, I think we should now prepare to not let the numbers surge.
She also said that scientists are looking into developing some sort of a pan-coronavirus vaccine, which could potentially be useful as different variants arise. She also did say that we will need time to learn more about this Omicron variant. Tessa Arcilia, CBC News, London.
Let's take a live look outside there. Temperatures are going to dip just below 0 tonight. And then over the weekend, we've got some snow on the way. Colette Kennedy will be here right after the break, and she will have your full weekend weather forecast in just a little bit. Stay with us. Colette Kennedy is here now for a look at our weather forecast and looking into the weekend. Looks like we got some snow on the way, Colette.
Yeah, we have a few things going on. I mean, there's two different systems that are coming through. We're going to see different types of precipitation. I'm not looking for accumulations for us at all because we'll see things warm up and most of this is going to turn to a rain event. So and there's some windy conditions in there too. Pretty good looking Saturday, however, a little cool to start things off, and then some mixed conditions on Sunday. So yes, it may start off as a little bit of light wet snow and then we'll see things changing over once we get into that warm sector. And so we'll see some milder temps, like temperatures, Sunday night into early Monday, and then the temperatures will be falling so that later on Monday it'll actually be cool again. So it's unfortunate just the way right now it looks like the timing of the system going through that we won't really get to enjoy much of the warmer air that comes along with it because much of it is in the overnight hours. Your current readings right here, you're seeing your temperatures there. A little bit of light flurry activity off of the lakes, although some of that not even reaching ground level. And what we're going to see with the system tomorrow, it's an Alberta clipper that's going to move through, but that it's going to stay to the north of us. So a little light snow if you're going to be traveling in the province, but if you're staying put in southwestern Ontario, you ought to be able to get out and about and enjoy yourself with some dry roadways and some nice sunshine to go in there as well. But then here we are into Sunday. So this is Sunday morning. Ahead of the warm front, meaning you're not yet into the warm sector, is where we tend to get that snow and sometimes even a bit of mixed precipitation or freezing rain. That's going to kind of skim through the area. That's where we get that kind of dusting, a little bit sloppy in there. And then pretty rapidly we'll find that temperature rising, the wind's getting strong as the center of the storm gets closer, but changing over to a rain event. So here it is Sunday night. So Sunday, kind of the second half of the day, looking a little uncomfortable on those roads, and early morning with the light snow, and then later with the heavier precipitation. And even into Monday, although we'll see early rain showers and then get a dry slot in here on the backside, some of that light snow coming back in late Monday as the cooler air filters in. Overnight tonight, -5 for Sarnia and London, but closer to just hugging, just beneath the freezing mark there for Windsor. And tomorrow we're going up to 5 degrees with those breezy conditions, with those winds coming in. They'll be driven in out of the west. So that's kind of the only thing to take note of. There you go, Sunday. This is what's weird about our temperatures, or it's just the way the timing is. So nearly steady, or if anything rising, but we get into that early on Monday, and then look at by Monday night into Tuesday. That's what I mean by that colder air that will filter in behind this system.
It'll definitely really feel like winter that night.
Yeah, that's going to be a big change, adjustment.
Thanks so much, Colette, and have a great weekend.
You as well.
When we come back, we're going to tell you about a Windsor church's efforts to collect clothing for those who really, really need it. That story is coming up right after the break. Stay with us. Canada's latest employment numbers are out and show a huge jump in new jobs last month, about 4 times what forecasters were predicting. Statistics Canada says more than 150,000 new jobs were added to the economy in November. The unemployment rate dipped to just 6%. That's down from 6.7% in October. Windsor's unemployment also moved down to 8.1%. A Windsor church plans to add some extra warmth to the community this winter in the shape of cozy socks, comfy pajamas, and snug coats. The Exchange Church is running a clothing pickup from a daycare in the West End.
We know that the west end of Windsor is actually one of the most needy pockets in all of Canada. And so last year we did something amazing in the school at Marlborough. We gave every single student a coat for Christmas. And so we thought, hey, let's see if we can expand our reach.
And the program has expanded. Another handful of schools in the West End have joined the project. Families have been given vouchers. They can come, treat it like a shopping experience, and select whatever they need for the holidays. The pastor says the church has never done a giveaway on this scale before. And lastly, we had to share this. That's Miss Wiper, a teacher with the public board here in Windsor, Essex. She posted this upbeat video on TikTok to celebrate one of her students becoming a Canadian citizen. And she marked it with, what else? Tim Biebs from Tim Hortons. Doesn't get more Canadian than that. That is it for CBC Windsor News. Thanks for watching and have a wonderful weekend.